This is a court of law. The standards of evidence are completely different.
The court accepts the existence of God every time a witness swears to tell the truth. I think it's about time they accept the existence of the devil.
Well, dipping back into a successful franchise here, the Conjuring series, which is now 7 films strong, including the first 2 films under the Conjuring title, as well as the Annabelle haunted ragdoll films and The Nun. Together, they've all made about $1.8 billion, so there's no question New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers would want to continue this. And this continues the actual Conjuring, which involves directly Ed and Lorraine Warren, and all of these movies are based on some sort of real-life events, and that's what sets them apart, I think, from the usual horror films here, which just seem to lay on all the tropes of the genre in any way they can, but don't stick to reality. This one does, and in fact, Ed and Lorraine Warren were clairvoyant demonologists, paranormal investigators who have participated in a lot of famous cases here and give a good case for maybe some of this stuff actually happened. It all started for them with the Amityville Horror in 1970, something that was looked on by the Lutz family as real, but then said to be a hoax. However, Lorraine Warren says absolutely not a hoax, and you believe it as you see all of these stories and these case studies they've done over the years come to fruition, and this one being perhaps the darkest one. They've abandoned, for this version of The Conjuring, the whole haunted house concept that was so prevalent in their other films, and this time have gone into the world of exorcisms. And anytime you're going to do that, everything's going to be compared to the 1973 classic from William Friedkin, The Exorcist. This is no Exorcist, definitely not. That was unique unto itself. But because it was true, and actually, if you stay to the end of the film and the credits, you're going to actually hear actual audio from this exorcism that sets off this story here.
You can't set him up. My God!
And really, the hook of the story is this is about the first murder trial in U.S. history that used demonic possession as a legal defense. That legal defense for a young man named Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, played here by Rory O'Connor. He's very good in this as he becomes possessed after participating in an exorcism, also which featured participants Ed and Lorraine Warren, even though in the real life case they weren't involved directly in this. It was another exorcism that they participated in that led to Ed having a heart attack, and that's what happens in this one. So they fiddled around with the truth here and added a lot of kind of composite characters and things, but have stuck to the basic facts of it. And here, the whole film actually starts with this exorcism right in the beginning. And I should say, once again, Ed and Lorraine Warren are played by those 2 leads from the previous films here. That would be Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. And they're back here. They fit these roles just like a glove. This time we have this whole family, and it's a true case, the case of the Glatzel family here, and where they are trying to get the devil out of the young boy here, who is really gone through several exorcisms. This one focuses on the final exorcism of David Glatzel, played here by Julian Hilliard, who is a veteran of these kind of horror films. Even at his very young age here, he's convincing. He has to look terrified and constantly. And that opening sequence, which would normally be the closing of a film like this is just where it starts, folks. And all of them are gathered around, of course, with the Catholic priest and everything else going on, trying to exorcise these demons out of young David. And among those people there, in addition to the Glatzel family, is this young boyfriend here, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, the boyfriend of Debbie Glatzel, played here by Sarah Catherine Hook. He's there helping out in this, and he does something that's an absolute no-no in exorcisms, looks directly into the kid, talking to the devil, and says, "Get out of him, get out of him." And what happens? Well, it seems that he's jumped into Arnie.
I think I hurt someone.
He is completely haunted by all these demons, possessed himself to a certain degree. He does wind up, however, stabbing to death his good friend and also his landlord. That sets off this whole legal case here because he says it wasn't a murder, he was possessed, and it's the demon possession case that took a case here in this very famous trial that this whole movie is hooked on. It's an interesting premise here. It's played out with all kinds of scenes of the hauntings of these characters here and what happens. You see the usual tropes that go into these kind of horror films there as it continues along. And as for Ed and Lorraine Warren, their involvement here, particularly as her psychic talents come into play here, and she sees all these things and she can go back and actually figure out what happened just based with her psychic ability here. There's an interesting scene here with one of the priests, Father Kastner, played here by John Noble, where they go and visit him and see his artifact room with all of the things from his various exorcisms. Now, you know that's a trope of all the Conjuring movies because the Warrens had their own artifact room here, so it's a little switch on that. Very interesting to see how that goes. That's a good character. And in support also is the occultist, sort of the heavy here, not usually the devil's the heavy, but here it's the occultist played by Eugenie Bondurant, and she provides all kinds of trouble for the Warrens on a professional level here as it goes along. I really love The Conjuring Part 2. That was my favorite one of that. That's when they went overseas. But this one, as Exorcist movies go, is pretty good. It's pretty gripping, and there are a lot of frights here. It's certainly going to appeal to fans of this series, which seemingly they can't get enough of. It's a smart series, too, because it is based in fact, and certainly, like I said, at the end credits, you're going to see more of that played out here. Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, perfect in these roles, and particularly impressive is young Rory O'Connor, who plays this possessed teenager to the hilt and has quite the backstory. The real guy still lives, and it's an interesting thing. I won't give too much away on where it all goes. If you don't know the case, you're going to find out in its own way, in its own fictionalized piece of nonfiction. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is definitely worth checking out. It's going to be in theaters starting this week and on HBO Max, as all Warner Brothers movies are. Whichever way you can see it, if you're a fan of this type of horror film, particularly a fan of the Conjuring universe, I say go.